Hello, welcome back to Mark's House and Garden UK. This is a fig tree. This is actually Brunswick. Brunswick is one of the figs that is supposed to be easy to grow and get fruit from in the UK. Brown Turkey is another fig which is supposed to be good for growing in the UK. I was given this fig by a friend of mine who is actually a volunteer for the RSPCA in Crewe and Nantwich. So as a reward or a thank you for the gift of this fig tree, all the proceeds from YouTube of this video are going to the RSPCA. So watch it, share it, like it, comment. It'll help the RSPCA. Anyway, getting back to this, I was given this last year, and it was a subject of a video I did called Fig Tree Rescue. When I got this fig, it was in a sorry state, but I just went with logic really and did all the things that I think, generally speaking, plants need. And that is, you try and emulate the native conditions of a plant, and then you care for it. You give it water and you give it food. I repotted that into a terracotta pot. I gave it a fresh compost. I put lots of drainage in, and I left it over winter. And as you can see, from this lovely fresh green growth at the top here, it's really responded to treatment. Today, this is getting planted. So I've been soaking it in this steel pot here in water for the last hour, giving it a really good hydration before I plant it into the ground. I'm going to tip it out onto these plastic trays. I'm going to have a look at the root system that it's developed, and then I'm going to plant it into this mound behind me. Whilst I'm doing that, I'll talk to you about figs, fig tree care, some of the things I know about figs, and I'll tell you while I'm planting it here as well in the process. But for now, I'm going to tip it out here because it's going to be too heavy for me to manhandle up there. It's full of water and it's in a terracotta pot. So we'll bring the camera in close, we'll tip it out and have a look what's happened under the soil surface. And over it goes, and I will try and get the terracotta pot out now. Oh yeah, it's extremely heavy, is that? I'll move that out of the way. And then we shall tip it forwards. I want to try and save this gravel if I can, because it's always good drainage or mulch in a pot. You can see it's lovely and well soaked there. Let's get this out. Now I'm using gloves here. Now I do tend to use gardening gloves, but it's quite important that you use gloves when you're dealing with figs, because when you cut into a fig, it can produce a latex, which is actually sometimes quite an irritant. Now, are we going to be able to get that? The cane has snapped, so that's made life slightly easier. There's the cane. Am I going to be able to get that out of there without damaging the roots too much? Let's dig away at it, and then hopefully I shall be able to gently encourage it out. Here it comes. Now, while we're looking at this fig's new roots, let's talk about the roots. I spoke a moment ago about looking after plants and applying logic and kind of trying to emulate their native conditions. Just using some scissors just to remove that cane. Figs come from places which are very rocky, very arid and very barren. So they're used to surviving without much nutrition in the soil. And because of those rocks in their native soil, they've kind of evolved to be able to cope with that. So good conditions for a fig will include a restricted root run. You've probably heard that before. It's something I think I already knew about figs, which is why I've got these bits of concrete here. When I plant that into that mound, I'm going to restrict its root run around the outside of the hole, around the perimeter. However, a fig tree does like to put down quite a deep taproot. It's evolved to have a deep taproot because it's used to going down, searching for water in the aquifers. So that's some interesting information that you should bear in mind whenever you're planting a fig. Give it space to go down, to look for aquifers, to look for water, but do restrict its root run around the outside. That way it will produce more fruit. Now, figs and fig fruits, how do you get them to produce fruit? In their native lands where they come from, they have quite a long, sunny growing season, which enables them to produce ripe fruits. It needs a long, hot summer to produce a lovely, ripe fruit. In the UK, it's slightly different. So there's a couple of things worth remembering. A fig will produce two crops. It will produce what's known as a Breba crop and a main crop. The Breba crop comes from the buds which set at the back end of last year, and they start developing early on in the spring in the UK, and therefore they have a long season to mature and become ripe fruits. Now in the UK it will also try and produce a main crop, but unfortunately it starts to produce the main crop on buds which set in the spring, and they very rarely, if ever, have enough time in the summer to mature and ripen. So if you're getting ripe figs on your fig tree in the UK, it's probably the Breba crop from last year's buds. If you're lucky and you have a long summer and you live in a warm place and it's in a sheltered position, you may well get a main crop as well. That informs how you prune it, because if you do want to rely on your Breba crop from last year's buds, you don't want to prune them all off in the springtime. So let it grow, let it mature. And then when it comes to the point in time when it's too big, do selective pruning. Just prune a third or a half of the branches off. That way you've got a good chance of leaving some of the Breba buds from last year on to mature this year. And I hope that all makes sense. Now there's a guy on YouTube called Lionheart who I think is quite a specialist on figs. I'll put a link to his channel in the video, in the description box below this video. So if you want much more information about figs, do go there. I'm going to get this planted now. It's got a lovely set of roots, and look at that lovely long root there. I suspect that will become a taproot. So I'll dig a nice deep hole for that, and then I'll restrict the root growth, the root run around here. Now that doesn't want to dry out, so whilst I'm digging the hole, I'll place it in here, which is basically a tub of water. Ideally do this on a cloudy or wet day. It was wet this morning when I started work. The sun's come out. And ideally prepare the hole. I'm going to go over here now, dig the hole, put the concrete around the edge, and then we can get that in. Now I'm putting this on this mound here because I want a bit of height on this mound, and I also want it to cast shade down here onto these ferns, which are next to what's going to be a water feature in the very near future. It will also hopefully produce some fruit, and the fruit will be for both me and the wildlife, because this is also my wildlife garden in the wildlife corner of my garden. I'm trying to keep this hole quite narrow, and at the same time I'm trying to make it as deep as possible. I'm using this long handle Irish spade, which is quite good for getting down deep. It's got a long handle and you get some quite nice leverage. Now that hole is already as deep as that long taproot that we saw earlier, so I think that is going to do the trick. I'll bring the camera in close and you can kind of have a look at how narrow and deep that hole is. So there we are, peering down into the hole, and it's at least that deep, as you can see, and that's all we really need. I'm now going to line the outside of that with concrete to restrict this fig's root run, but I will allow it to go down deep. I have to say, it does feel a little sort of counterintuitive doing this to a plant. You kind of develop opinions about gardening, and those opinions are generally that you want to give a plant a lot of nutrients around its roots, and And this is kind of almost like, feels like it's going against the grain, but apparently that's what they like. So that's what we shall do. I think I've hit an ant's nest here because there's thousands of ants. But there are some gaps for roots to come around, but that will allow the root to go down deep and at the same time restrict the root run around the edge. It does look a bit weird though, doesn't it? It's almost like leaving it in a pot in a way. Now this is the compost that it was in before, and it had only been in that for 6 months, and most of those months were the winter months, so that compost won't be very well spent. And in any event, figs don't like to be overfed, so I'm going to reuse that in the bottom of this hole. They do like to be well watered, so you don't want to let them dry out. And that's why they send those roots down looking for aquafers. Ooh, lovely great big fat worm there, that can go in the hole. But this soil, this compost, will be ideal for this fig. And it's also good that I'm not wasting it. There's another rock there that can go on the edge. So really I'm just kind of preparing further the hole that fig is going to go into with this quite gritty and very wet compost. And here's the fig plant ready to go in, and I'm very aware that this probably seems like a very unconventional way of planting a plant. Now I want those deep roots to carry on going deep. If you're keeping a fig in a pot, apparently it's nice to have a nice deep pot. These roots, look at how long that one is there. I'm hoping that will become a tap root, so I'm going to encourage that to go further down into that hole. Now we shall get the other roots planted in. I'm only planting it to the same depth as it was before, and I'm gently firming the soil in around the roots, and only gently because I don't want to do any damage. They will be quite delicate having only just grown. And what I'm also going to do in a moment is give it a good watering in, and I'll probably place some rocks around the top here so that when I do water it, the water goes down. That's going to need a new cane. It's a bit too flimsy, so I'll go and grab a cane and tie it up just to give it a bit more stability. So in goes a new cane right next to the existing trunk, and I can feel that going all the way down into the soil quite deep, and I'll tie that to it using some twine. I'm also going to just give it a bit more ballast with a few more bits of rock and brick around the top, which are not particularly attractive, I have to say, but they should stabilise it whilst it puts additional roots down. We've got the rest of the summer ahead of us for that to get established, which it should do. I'll keep it well watered for 6 months. I hope you've enjoyed that. I'm feeling quite positive about my new fig tree, thanks to Eva and Chris, and I hope this video does well for the RSPCA. See you soon for some more fig tree adventures. Bye for now.